In the world of One Punch Man, the S-Class position is reserved for individuals capable of dealing with disaster-level monsters that would be threat to entire cities. It's actually the bare minimum requirement where an S-Class hero needs to at least defeat one demon. However, not all S-Class heroes are created equal. Their abilities, specialties, sheer destructive potential, IQ, and things of that nature vary drastically from one to another. In this video, to give you a more precise ranking, we've developed a detailed 7-tier system. This in fact lets us accurately assess each S-Class hero's strength across all their forms and their most current power-ups. But before, a couple of things you need to understand before starting the rankings. 1. It's perfectly okay to disagree with each other. People have different opinions, views, and interpretations, but it requires to be under the light of logic. For example, you can't be saying the Deep Sea King beats Bug God when there are narratively and logically many evidence to suggest otherwise. 2. Lists can change in the future. Nuances, additional chapters, subscribing to different interpretations, etc, etc. And 3. As I always say, matchups specifically in One Punch Man matter. A character that is placed super high can somehow lose to another who's placed low. Stylistic matchups and different abilities. And with that being said, let's start ranking these heroes from weakest to absolute strongest. Starting off this list with the weakest forms or states of the S-Class heroes, at number 36 and 35 we have Real King and Skinny Pig God. These two characters are portrayed as normal average human beings, as King in reality is nothing but a fraud who takes credit for Saitama's achievements, and Pig God, when skinny, isn't really a character that can fight, portrayed as useless without replenishing by consuming food. Well, it's not really clear if he's actually a weak average human being, but at least he should be stronger than King and presumably weaker than the next character. At number 34 we have Child Emperor with absolutely no equipment. Now this might sound weird, but in Volume 10's bonus chapter, it's actually revealed that Child Emperor possesses physical prowess even higher than someone like Stinger. A 10-year-old child with so little time of training managed to surpass a decently strong A-class hero. This is actually substantiated by the fact that the same child can actually react to an attack from a demon level monster and later do the same thing with a cadre named Evil Natural Water while being deprived of sleep for 3 days. You can actually still argue that due to these two crazy feats he should be scaled way higher, but the only reason he's here is because compared to the rest of the S-Class heroes, his physical strength, while very impressive, isn't portrayed to hold up to the rest of these anomalies. At number 33 we have No Sword Atomic Samurai. Now this is actually something highlighted a lot in the webcomics and not so much in the manga. The notion is that Kamikaze, once he loses his sword or it breaks, becomes a low-tier character, but his physical strength is still rather decent than what actually people think. He can take hits from Black S multiple times and actually didn't get butchered by a tentacle hit from Platinum S. The same attack, if assumed they have equal force, completely destroyed Zombie Man and led Puri Puri to deduce that Child Emperor needed to be protected. This goes to show that Atomic Samurai's physical strength isn't really that bad. Now, jumping to low tier at number 32 and 31, we have First Form Genos and Deep Sea King Arc Puri Puri Prisoner. This is the Genos we've seen for the first time in the story that fought against Mosquito Girl, Armored Gorilla, and got completely manhandled by Base Carnage Kabuto. And this version of Puri Puri Prisoner is the same character that was defeated by a dehydrated form of the Deep Sea King. Now, the only reason we scale Puri Puri above initial Genos is simply for the fact that he assumably fought the stronger opponents. Particularly for the lack of additional showings and statements, we believe that Base Deep Sea King is at least the character that can contend with the Beast King, who's the same monster that is in contention with Blood Mosquito Girl, who toyed with Genos easily. But Puri Puri Prisoner fighting Base Deep Sea King definitely doesn't mean he scales to him, as his strongest barrage of attacks couldn't even damage him in the first place. So you can definitely twist this and say that maybe this Genos could probably do better or at least perform on a relative massive raids, but the fact that it requires 2 additional upgrades to fight the Deep Sea King, and one that had such a greater boost to the point that Dr. Genius thought he could defeat Saitama with it, according to the anime, doesn't really help Genos' case. So for now, initial Puri Puri should be above initial form of Genos. Just above Puri Puri Prisoner, at number 30, we have Arms Mode Genos. A form in terms of showing should definitely be placed above the characters mentioned so far. You see, Arms Mode Genos' biggest claim of fame here obviously comes from his fight against the partially transformed state of the Deep Sea King and managing to pull up a much better fight than Puri Puri Prisoner. It's actually after dismissing the fact that Genos could hurt and blitz even hydrated Deep Sea King, a feat that couldn't even be done by Sonic, who was a much better combatant than Puri Puri Prisoner. It's actually also quite surprising that even with the nerf of Genos losing his arm, Deep Sea King still resorts to include civilians in order to secure the victory, which completely solidifies why Arms Mode Genos should be placed right here. Speaking of which, we have beginning of season 2 or pre-G4 Genos and Base Metal Bat at number 29 and 28. Now for those who doesn't know, this version of Genos managed to defeat the Deep Sea King in the VGS with absolutely no difficulties, same one he struggled against with the prior arm sets. And Metal Bat, on the other hand, in his regular base without using his fighting spirit, still holds a higher position than season 2 Genos simply because he has done much better against Base Carnage Kabuto in the virtual simulation system. It doesn't really take a genius to compare between these two feats, as Genos got blitzed before he finished his sentence while Base Metal Bat lasted for 3 minutes straight. This is a clear-cut comparison made by the story itself to showcase Base Metal Bat's supremacy against Genos at that time of the story. Now post G4 Genos should be relative to Base Metal Bat for fighting demons who should be on a similar tier, so I don't think we need to put a number for this specific form. Which leads us to 3 characters that I believe are very controversial in the One Punch Man space. At number 27, 26 and 25 in order, we have Tank Top Master, Fat Big God and Monster Arc Puri Puri. Now while Tank Top Master was very impressive against Garu, essentially being able to damage him multiple times with a few punches and tackles, it doesn't take away from the fact that Garu himself was actually holding back his usage of martial arts that would have allowed him to defeat him much earlier. It's very important to remember that Tank Top Master is literally Garu's first S-Class hero, and prior to this exchange he didn't use the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist simply because he never felt the need to. It's exactly this fight where Garu learns that against these S-Class heroes, using techniques and martial arts is always warranted. So the reason Tank Top Master even managed to land the first hit is because Garu was still testing the heat, and as soon as he used the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist, Tank Top Master was completely destroyed. Now when comparing Tank Top Master and Puri Puri Prisoner, people essentially look at these two feats and say that since Puri Puri Prisoner took these heavy punches from a far stronger Garu and was still able to continue to fight after alongside the heroes, it clearly indicates his superior physical strength. But others would argue the case that redirecting hits with double the opponent's force using the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist could be more damaging than regular hits from a sleeping Garu. And to be perfectly honest, it's a very healthy interpretation, but in my opinion, once you start thinking about it more, this idea kinda starts to fade away. Now talking about this from a scaling standpoint, the level Garu reached at that point should eclipse the level of damage that was performed on Tank Top Master even when it's double the force. Remember that the same unconscious Garu that punched Puri Puri Prisoner is the same one who's on a physical level that allowed him to tank a strong punch from Darkshine. Darkshine is the same character that didn't even require the need to use a similar force to destroy transformed Bug God. Pair this with the fact that Garu managed to one-shot Royal Ripper where before he couldn't, even when using his own redirected slash and converted it to a strong kick, which means at this instance we do have an idea that Garu with the Zenkai boost evolved to the point of one-shotting a monster he couldn't before even when using the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist. Now give Garu more strength due to experiencing multiple boosts after, and Puri Puri Prisoner was able to take that kind of hit. Granted, this is only when using his Angel Bristle armor. It's actually more substantiated by the fact that Puri Puri Prisoner withstood a hit from a Cadre and didn't fall down. So to say that Garu didn't evolve enough to gain physical strength that exceeds Tank Top Master's double the force is very questionable, and Puri Puri took it like a champ. There's also nothing that suggests that Garu held back when he was sleeping, it's just a notion to make sense of Puri Puri taking that kind of hit. Now we do have have one other feat that people mention regarding Tank Top Master, which is his impressive display against Gums, where he successfully resisted his bite force even when the monster was exerting maximum pressure. But it's very important to understand that this feat specifically is only possible due to Tank Top Master's specialty, which is lifting and pushing strength. There's a huge misconception in the community where people believe that if you scale a character above Tank Top Master, then that means they can perform the same thing. But let's say we put Garu or Metal Bat on the same situation. Do you guys really believe they would pull it off? Absolutely not. There is a huge difference between lifting strength and attack or striking strength. For example, if you take Metal Bat and Tank Top Master to the gym, Tank Top Master would obviously be able to lift and push weight much more. It actually wouldn't even be close. But if you take them to the octagon or a boxing ring, Metal Bat and Garu would have the strength to strike him down. Remember that each S-class hero has a specialty or a niche that they excel at the most, much better than even characters who are stronger than them. Flashy Flash is a speedster, and he himself doubts any hero could be as fast as him. Darkshine has durability stated to be the best in the heroes industry. Atomic Samurai has swordsmanship stated to being the strongest swordman in the verse. And with Tank Top Master, he's a gym rat that specializes in lifting and pushing strength. He can lift a building containing Darkshine but could never necessarily hurt Darkshine himself. Bomb, on the other hand, who's a much superior fighter than Tank Top Master and has much higher durability and attack potency, specifically says that it's very hard for him to keep lifting the 4 or 5 fallen heroes. The point is, Tank Top Master is one of the few characters that can perform this feat. Doesn't mean he scales to Gum, it's simply a matter of matchups where he can hang on in this one particular situation. So these are my reasons why I believe Puri Puri Prisoner scales above Tank Top Master, but why is Pig God in the middle of both? You see, Pig God is definitely a weird case. Some believe he's weak and some believe he's underrated. I tend to be the latter. But I completely understand if some of you guys would put him below Tank Top Master. His only feat is to clash with Gums, and he didn't really do anything aside this one time where he pushed him to save his fellow hero. But people tend to forget that Gums was specifically chosen to fight Pig God since the matchup doesn't favor him. I've actually also never heard anyone talk about his feat of surviving Gums' acid, the same acid that immediately melted Fuhrer ugly skin. He also seems to have some kind of regeneration, since later his wounds completely disappeared. So my thing with this is, yes, in theory, Master did stop a much more strengthened bite from Gums, but that's not a fair comparison since it's literally his specialty and would only favor him in such situations. Putting Tank Top Master above Pig God simply because of this seems pretty intuitive to me, especially since Pig God was able to straight up clash with Gums even when he's put up in an unfair position. I'm sure this character is going to be placed higher after, since he did foreshadow a strong move he still didn't show, and assumably got stronger for maybe consuming Gums by the end of the arc. So Tank Top Master is 27, Pig God is 26, and Monster Arc Puri Puri is 25. But since they're very controversial, shuffling their placements shouldn't create major issues. Now the next tier is gonna have characters that objectively do have better showings than the previous heroes. So low/mid tier at number 24 we have Pumped Up Metal Bat. Metal Bat in this particular situation is the one who was fighting against Garu and almost managed to defeat him. Because of his stubbornness nature, his strength in particular has certainly been increasing the more damage he takes. That's why he goes from struggling with Senior Centipede to one-shotting him right after, which clearly indicates that now he can put up a much better fight against Carnage Kabuto. Now he did ultimately lose to Hero Hunter Garu, which is a character that can basically defeat anyone in the previous tier except maybe Pig God. And that's largely because Garu's Water Streamlock Smashing Fist is built to counter characters like him. But even with this disadvantage, Metal Bat was much more impressive than Tank Top Master and almost clutched a victory, as the author himself confirmed that his final swing would have killed Garu. You could even theorize that his body has a kind of muscle memory for his powered up states, which explains how he could hold his own against Sage Centipede even before taking damage and getting pumped up. So to make things simple, he's above Tank Top Master and Puri Puri Prisoner simply because he almost killed Garu, who's an opponent these two can never defeat. At number 23 we have Watchdog Man. Now objectively speaking, placing Watchdog Man at any place above this is obviously going to be based on headcanon, as there are absolutely no arguments, no evidence, and no feats to suggest he should be on a higher position. But is this where he should always be placed at? I highly doubt it. This is ultimately just the safe safest area you can place him at for now. But personally speaking, I do believe that this character has the potential to be someone as strong as, let's say, for example, Flashy Flash. But for now, it's like trying to scale Flashy Flash solely based on his one fight against a demon level monster. He's basically here because of the simple matter that he actually handed Garu his first loss, something all the previous fighters failed to do. But I'll also talk about some points people do mention when talking about this character. A lot of people say that since he never lost a fight and never left City Q, it's safe to assume that he at least encountered the dragon level monster once at some point. Well, that's not necessarily true, since before the Monster Association arc, dragon level monsters rarely appeared. That Genos considered the meeting behind all of the S-class heroes would only mean a dragon level threat has appeared. There's also Vaccine Man, who appeared in City A and was considered as the most dangerous monster at that time. So the notion that Watchdog Man has defeated a dragon level monster before is very questionable. The only two things that suggest he may be a top tier character is his face that resembles Saitama's and the fact that he's one of the heroes that we didn't see go all out. Other than that, we have absolutely nothing, so number 23 should be the safest bet. At number 22, 21 and 20, we have one Metal Knight's robot, Backpack Child Emperor, and end of season 2 Genos. Now, we've only seen Metal Knight's robot in action twice. The first one when it launched missiles at Z-City's Meteor, and later when it fought against Elder Centipede. But sadly enough, neither situation really gives us a clear picture of its full strength. However, we do have two key statements that might help us piece things together. The first one comes from Bofoy himself, as he mentioned that Orochi used one horn attack to pierce the robot. It's very hard to know exactly what that means for its durability, as Orochi might have used more power than necessary, but I'd say you can definitely have the interpretation that it requires an attack of that caliber to destroy that robot. The statement was issued for a reason. This is the kind of attack that even red-haired Garu struggled with, and to be perfectly honest, I don't subscribe to the idea that this one robot scales to red-haired Garu. The second and more concrete statement is that Metal Knight's level 10 defensive robots we see after the Monster Association arc are capable of defeating two demon level threats at once. So you can wonder if that's what his defensive models can do. It's reasonable to assume or interpret that his primary combat robot might be much stronger. Based on this, if you allege that Metal Knight would generalize this conclusion based on fighting strong demons, you can then place it at peak of the demon level threats or potentially even into the low tier of dragons. Obviously, nothing really is confirmed and we're building this based on pure speculations and assumptions. You can place it way lower by saying that even someone like Monster Arc Puri Puri or Metal Bat could or has defeated two dragon level monsters simultaneously. Therefore, they should be above this one robot. And you can definitely say that since this one particular combat robot should be much more above his level 10 defensive sets, since he always sends this against the dragon level monster, he should be this high or much higher. One other thing you can mention is that when Child Emperor saw what Orochi did to one Metal Knight robot, he started hoping not to run into Orochi despite stating that he built Brave Giant specifically for that monster. Remember that Child Emperor was a lab assistant to Bofoy, so seeing that he started believing that he couldn't defeat Orochi with Brave Giant would mean that he thinks it's a very impressive feat to destroy this one robot, which technically could place it above Backpack Child Emperor and even on a similar tier as Brave Giant. But again, just assumptions and pure headcanon, as this is generally the safest place you can put it at. Now, Child Emperor with his backpack isn't losing to any demon level monster, since he's confident he'd only use Brave Giant against a big shot. That's exactly why he was crying when he started using it on Dragon Phoenix Man, who's technically not an executive. He did run away from G5, since why fight and waste gadgets when you already have the kid rescued and already accomplished his goal. But the reason he is above everybody else is because despite most of them having the ability to one-shot demon level monsters, he went a step further and shown the ability to literally one-shot a demon who is regarded as top 3 in the series, a monster stated as a big shot in the volume story description, which technically makes him stronger than Bug God and Royal Ripper, two monsters that contended with Red-Haired Garu. Red-Haired Garu is obviously much stronger than Hero Hunter Garu, who was able to take down Metal Bat with no difficulties, which makes Child Emperor operates on a much higher level. He's also above one Metal Knight's robot, since his chain of scaling is richer and more concrete than a bunch of statements. End of Season 2 Genos or EC Genos Genos is a complete different beast who has pretty good reasons to be placed directly over Child Emperor. This is simply because of the fact that he was able to somehow contend with Elder Centipede. You see, it's very important to note that Genos' spiral cannon packs enough power to make Silver Fang and Bomb consider using one of their strongest attacks to top it against Elder Centipede. Not to mention the fact that despite this failing, Genos still thought he has a chance. He even managed to break Elder Centipede's tooth and inflict damage that seemed comparable to, if not greater than, the combined force of Bang and Bomb's attack. The story also implies that Phoenix Man and Garu would have been killed if Elder Centipede didn't protect them from the spiral cannon that probably wasn't the best Genos can exert. Now, the counter argument to this placement of Genos is saying that he was struggling with a fatigued poisoned Garu, which means he should scale below even the likes of Metal Bats, who was able to contend with a healthy Garu. But your argument simply falls down when you can't point out one single successful exchange from Garu against Genos. The time Garu used the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist to defend against Genos and kicked him to the ground was all part of the plan to lure him to eat the Incineration Cannon. Not to mention that a full kick to the back of Genos' head did absolutely no damage. Genos also allowed Garu to take off his hand purposely to surprise him with an unpredictable counterattack. You can generally tell that Garu wasn't a threat to Genos since the latter wasn't worried the whole fight. The webcomics actually strengthens this much more, but we're not gonna mix between the two as I'm planning to start making scaling videos on webcomic chapters. But nonetheless, the only somehow valid argument against Genos at this point is that Garu thought that he's a frightening opponent only at his current condition, implying at full health this wouldn't have been a problem, which should put Genos below Child Emperor, but I think it's more fair to disregard the hypothetical situation and judge Genos based on his performance against Elder Centipede. Now, the mid-tier is where things get a little bit too heated, with the first picks already being controversial. At number 19 and 18, we have Daedric Form Genos and Prep Time Drive Knight. I think a matchup between these two is very close, as there are arguments to be thrown for either parties. Both has shown the capabilities of fighting dragon level monsters at some extent, and when both were low on energy, they were still somehow relative in chasing down Psycho Orochi's jets. While Genos does imply it's too early for him to fight dragon level monsters, but I think Genos is being a little bit too harsh on himself, as he only tangled with them when he was not operating at full power. So strictly speaking, Daedric Genos and Drive Knight fighting dragon level monsters is much better than anything we've seen from Child Emperor, Watchdog Man, and Metal Bat. Now, one might argue that Drive Knight defeating a dragon level monster Neon by himself is much more impressive than anything Genos has done without his 10-second mode. So placing one above the other doesn't pose any issues for me. The simple fact is that they are portrayed as somehow relative. Now, at number 17, we have the most controversial pick on this video in my opinion, which is Brave Giant. And to be perfectly honest, prior to making this video, I've always held Brave Giant and Phoenix Man on higher regards, but after rereading and indulging deeply on every argument that makes them seem stronger, I feel like there is always some type of justification or debunk that would nullify these arguments. You see, it's no secret that Brave Giant's strength all depends on how strong you think Phoenix Man is, as their scaling kinda goes back to back. If there's a statement in favor of Child Emperor, it will also be a testament of how strong Phoenix Man is. With that being said, the general arguments put on the table to support he's a top tier character are the following. Number 1, and it's really that simple, Child Emperor has prior knowledge on Elder Centipede. Being the strategist of the group, he should have attained more infos from the Hero Association, possibly even stats of when he fought against Blast back in a day. And with that knowledge, he specifically stated that he made Brave Giant to fight the Monster King Orochi. Seeing that it's no secret that Orochi is the leader of the Monster Association, paired with how Bofoy has shown real concerns towards the same monster, it's safe to say that a genius like Child Emperor thinking he can fight Orochi with Brave Giant makes him believe he would be able to defeat someone like Elder Centipede. The second argument, Phoenix Man Man has seen Elder Centipede in action twice, so he's fully aware of how strong he is. He's also a middle manager that discusses things with Giro, such as having the information that Elder Centipede can only be defeated by 4 heroes. However, when he transformed and attacked Child Emperor, he specifically stated that out of all creatures, he is number 1, which means he simply put himself above Elder Centipede. Third argument, Phoenix Man was able to penetrate 5 of Child Emperor's invisible defensive walls with absolutely no difficulties. This at the time didn't really matter, but after, in the surface battle, Homeless Emperor aims this supercharged bomb on Child Emperor that did this much damage. Child Emperor survives this by being behind Underdog Man and 1 single defensive wall. This is extremely impressive since Homeless Emperor with a bunch of small orbs completely dismantled Vomiter Fury Ugly, who clashed with Darkshine in an even exchange, which gives the idea that Phoenix Man penetrating 5 walls like it was butter must be physically stronger than Homeless Emperor's supercharged bomb, which justifies him being at least on Elder Centipede's tier. Now, I do think that all of these do have merits, and you can definitely argue the case, but the counter arguments for each one are as follows. Debunk for argument 1. Most characters including Child Emperor don't really know how strong Elder Centipede is, therefore would have no metric to estimate how strong the Monster King is to make such a statement. The characters that do know how strong EC is by experiencing him at first hand didn't really have a chance to inform anything about it. Metal Bat was hospitalized and didn't join the S-Class Heroes meeting. Bang and Bomb, who are much more reliable on talking about EC given that they use their strongest attacks, were specifically excluded from the Monster Association raid, therefore didn't have the chance to exchange informations. All they ultimately know is that this is a dragon level monster who's a large creature that was defeated by the strongest hero. Remember, as I said before, prior to this, dragon level monsters were very rare. Someone like Vaccine Man was a huge threat to CDA that they considered calling out Tatsumaki. Not to mention that both monsters and heroes do talk their shit most of the times and they believe they can defeat anyone. I mean, you literally have Amai Mask here who later confirmed he has never defeated a dragon level monster, saying he'd kill the Monster King Orochi. So when viewed broadly, most heroes and monsters has never faced true adversity before being humbled. So even for a genius like Child Emperor, the simple fact remains that he simply doesn't have the full picture of how strong the heroes and the monsters are. There's actually a moment that proves that Child Emperor's estimation is wrong even though he's a genius, which is when he was shocked by how dismantled Metal Knight's robot was by 1 single strike from Orochi, indicating that he just doesn't have the full picture. Debunk for argument number 2, Phoenix Man stating that he is number 1 after getting a new surge of power can simply be explained by him talking his shit and being completely delusional. This is a long-running theme in manga/anime, as when some characters suddenly get boosted, the adrenaline rush makes them think they can now rule the world. I've always interpreted this as Phoenix Man talking his shit, same way Garu thinking he can show Orochi true fear, same one with Psycho Orochi when fused with Orochi thinking she can now defeat Saitama. It's just a result of good writing, as this even happens in real life, where a UFC fighter, for example, just learned how to defend grappling, started thinking he can do the same thing with a grappler who has been doing this his entire life. The point is, not anything a character says is meant to be reliable. Debunk for argument number 3, this argument falls down when you start thinking that a gadget dog and 1 wall are maybe on the level of Darkshine's physical strength, which is certainly not what the narrative suggests. This can be explained by a number of justifications. We've never seen that the dog and the wall completely tanked Homeless Emperor's bomb. All we've seen after is that Child Emperor is now buried underground. It could be that the defensive wall is designed to withstand energy rather than strong physical attacks, or that the dog and the wall tanks the initial heat instead of the full blast enough to quickly get buried underground. I know these are very wonky justifications, but you have to work your headcanon around the official facts and go from there. Otherwise, you'd be making Phoenix Man and Child Emperor extremely strong at the expense of the dog and the wall having arguments to withstand Darkshine's power, which is clearly not the case, especially when you follow the new Darkshine statements said in the webcomics. Child Emperor also defended that Pierce with his backpack, so do we say that the backpack's durability is on Darkshine's level? But anyways, with all of this yapping, I do think that Brave Giant is heavily underrated, and there are some merits to these 3 arguments. And I also do think that in the future, we'll have to raise his level much higher. But for now, based on these justifications, modifications that I provided, being interchangeable with characters that can fight and withstand low cadre level monsters should be the safest bet. At 16 and 15 we have base Atomic Samurai and base Silver Fang. Now Atomic Samurai has been into a numbers of matchups that don't really favor him. Black SSLs, Malzguard's Regeneration, and Vomited Ugly's Acid. But it certainly doesn't mean he's weak. According to Darkshine, Atomic Samurai is one of the heroes that could have dismantled Garu easily. The Garu he's talking about is the one who tanked his punch and prior fought Rover and Orochi. This Garu in terms of chain of scaling is already more impressive than monsters like Gums, Neon, and possibly Phoenix Man. 3 dragon level monsters that can contend with Drive Knight, Daedric Janos, and Brave Giant, which is exactly why he's above these characters. Now there could be an argument to be made, saying per example, since Atomic Samurai couldn't really destroy G5's core with his Atomic Slash, he'd struggle against the seemingly much more tankier robots / cyborgs, but it's not really fair to judge him based on that one single instance, as he does have other attacks he can dash out and has used the stronger one to injure a much more durable opponent, so this argument isn't really that sufficient. As for Silver Fang, if you account for his statement of not holding back against Garu, then he'd be placed much lower than this, possibly right there with end of season 2 Janos. But that's not really how the story portrays him. Silver Fang had a whole dedicated chapter named after his name to showcase that he's a character that could make a lot of difference in the battlefield, easily next Fury Ugly and saves Daedric Janos from Gums. He's also a character you see chilling with Black S on the same panel Atomic Samurai gets punched. Now what I'm about to say might sound weird, but if you think about it, it actually makes sense. Base Silver Fang would struggle with someone like Hero Hunter Garu much more than the majority of the cadres. What makes Silver Fang formidable is his perfect proficiency in the Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist. Someone who has a technique that can hold its usage would be much more impressive than humanoid monsters who would only be victims with absolutely no solution. So yes, while he was definitely not holding back against Garu, Silver Fang's main method of attacking is somehow getting negated by Garu's usage of the same technique, unlike with monsters where he can definitely and easily redirects their own monstrous physical attacks. That's why Bang on a general scaling spectrum should be within these tiers. This is also somehow substantiated by Silver Fang's spar with Darkshine, as even though Darkshine's punches should be much stronger, he just never had the chance to land them. That's why on a general scale, base Bang should be above. Now I think I'm gonna blow your mind with a hot take I'm gonna drop right now. At number 14 we have Zombie Man.
What?
And believe me when I say placing him here was a very hard choice to make. This is mainly because this is the tier of characters that can somehow fight or defeat Carnage Mode Kabuto. But here's the thing, Zombie Man on a combat ability spectrum isn't really that impressive, as you can argue many characters we've talked about so far can easily defeat him. However, on a narrative standpoint, Zombie Man isn't judged based solely on these properties, but rather because of his immortality. He can literally regenerate from any attack no matter how strong it is. The audiobook clearly tells you that Zombie Man waited for Carnage Mode Kabuto to run out of gas and killed him right after. Now tell me, who are the characters we mentioned so far that Zombie Man cannot do this to? If he can somehow still overcome Carnage Kabuto's durability, I don't think it's far-fetched to say that he'd obviously get his ass beaten by Atomic Samurai, Silver Fang, Metal Bat, Daedric Janos, etc, and when they're tired or low of energy, he'd use the same method to defeat them. Granted, this is in a situation where it's closed doors and forced to fight him one-on-one. You also gotta note that his ability is too busted that it required to pair him up against a monster that literally doesn't get tired from releasing destructive power. Now obviously there are multiple solutions to crack this puzzle, like for example, maybe Drive Knight or Child Emperor can trap him in some sort of box and just throw him in the ocean, Dio Brando style, or simply leave the battlefield because you just know you can never achieve victory. But the simple fact remains that he's placed right here because that's his whole thing. It's literally his way of fighting. Placing him way lower, only accounting for his physical stats, not his way of fighting, is like placing Silver Fang way lower, not accounting for his Water Stream Rock Smashing Fist. They can all defeat Zombie Man, but Zombie Man is built to be the last man standing. At number 13 we have Darkshine. Now the reason we have Darkshine above Zombie Man is simply because he already defeated Carnage Kabuto in 15 minutes, and we don't have any practical way of figuring out if Zombie Man's method method of overcoming the monster's durability would also work on Darkshine, as Darkshine could be sleeping the whole time and Zombie Man would have absolutely no way of bypassing his durability. As for the reason why he is above base Bang is actually simple. Darkshine can literally tank his own redirected attacks, double the force and take absolutely no damage, which indicates much higher durability than his attack potency. He also did state that a fight between them just ended in a stalemate, since Darkshine couldn't land any hit and Silver Fang couldn't really damage him. So it's really a matchups matter situation. Strictly speaking, in hypothetical situations against monsters, there are cases where Bang would do better and there are situations where Darkshine would excel at the most. But in comparison to Atomic Samurai or anybody below him, his feats of matching Spiral Garu and still hurting him even after he started breaking his limiter is simply much better than anything any character at this point has done. You can even argue that Darkshine's attack against Psycho Orochi's tentacle did much more damage than Atomic Samurai's. I'm not saying that Darkshine easily defeats base Atomic Samurai or base Silver Fang or anything of that sort. All I'm pointing out is that Darkshine does have the more broader impressive feats. Now, passing on to mid/high tier section, at number 12 we have Sunblade Atomic Samurai. So Sunblade Atomic Samurai is the clear definition of above Darkshine's level. As the same types of bombs that dismantled Vomited Ugly, Atomic Samurai is brushing them out like they were nothing. And the same monster that one-shotted Darkshine, Atomic Samurai sliced his hand off with one single exchange. This really paints the idea that Atomic Samurai with the Sunblade sword is just on another level. You could even argue that he should be on the same level as the two characters we're gonna be talking about in a minute, but the fact that he could only do this for a short amount of time due to low stamina suggests this is the best place you can put him at for now. Which brings us to the next characters that are, in my opinion, very interchangeable, and it all depends on which arguments you really subscribe to. At number 11 and 10 we have No Sword Flashy Flash and Awaken Breath Bang. Now, given that multiple videos has been made about this specific matchup, I'll only talk about it briefly. So some argue that Sleeping Garu was much more proficient in using multiple combinations of fists than Conscious Garu, who relied only on speed and used one unperfected Godslayer fist, which means Bang should be superior. And others say that Garu waking up is a clear indication that now he'd be much more focused and calculated, and even the story itself after displays his apparent increase in speed, which means Flashy Flash would be much faster than Bang and that would allow him to win. But regardless of what you think, this fight would certainly be close and we should have no problem in changing their both positions. Now, the reason they're up here in the first place is because both of them have fought a version of Garu who can compete on a physical level against Platinum S. Platinum S should be much stronger than his golden state, as Atomic Samurai was shitting his pants when he laid eyes on Platinum but said nothing in regards of golden. Flash with the sword and Silver Fang had multiple exchanges with Garu, who had thousands of exchanges with Platinum, feats that are considerably better than any character we've talked about so far. While there is the potential of Sunblade Atomic Samurai being able to do the same thing and possibly even more, but we can't have Atomic Samurai here when his best feat was besting Golden S, a much downgraded version of Platinum S. So Awaken Breath Bang and No Sword Flashy Flash should be here. Now at number 9 and 8 we have just the same characters with an additional buff who are also interchangeable. Awaken Silver Fang potentially using the Exploding Heart Fist and Flashy Flash with a sword. Now, on a narrative standpoint, the reason Silver Fang didn't use his Exploding Heart Fist against Garu is because he wanted to save his disciple same way his brother did for him in the past. The Exploding Heart Fist is also a vicious technique that Bang promised to never use. But this would only be the case against a fellow hero or his disciple, as I don't think Silver Fang won't use it against a monster if it means it would save others. Now, the reason this is even mentioned is because Bomb has stated that Bang had multiple instances and openings to use this fist and possibly even defeat Garu. The same arguments could be said about Flashy Flash with a sword, as we've seen before that Flash has defeated monsters with a Flashy Slash that just a moment ago couldn't defeat with multiple barrages of kicks. There are even arguments to be made that Flash gets considerably faster when performing his special techniques, as Platinum S himself knows that Flash is weaker without his sword, which means both Bang and Flash, if they were operating on full arsenal and full power, they would have much higher chances to defeat these monsters. Now passing on to the high tier section, at number 7 we have Rakan Brave Giant. Now this is obviously from Rakan chapters that were made a long time ago, and specifically this version of Brave Giant and Phoenix Man are no longer canon, but we'd still be talking about them nonetheless. So here's the thing, after Phoenix Man transforms to this overpowered form called Brilliant Eagle mode, unlike the canon version, Phoenix Man here was able to revive Gale Wind and Hellfire Flame in their monster's form. Remember that these two monsters were able to injure Flashy Flash enough to cough up blood, so they do somehow scale to his physical strength. However, Brave Giant here is so durable that both of these ninja couldn't make a scratch. And even in terms of speed, he doesn't seem worried or shown to not have the ability to react. In fact, there was an instance where he was able to tag Gale Wind. He was also able to match and hurt Brilliant Eagle Phoenix Man with his Millennium Nova, the same monster that prior blitzed him and easily ripped off Brave Giant's arm, a feat that monster Gale and Wind that scales to Flashy Flash couldn't replicate. Now I could see Flash slicing him with the Flashy Slash, as that one attack is much more destructive than his normal physical hits, but Brave Giant being able to fight these two monsters alongside Phoenix Man at the same time and still overcoming him, for me is just the much better showing. But again, I could still see Flash clutching the victory with his Flashy Slash. At number 6 we have Resonance Metal Bat, and this is one of the weirdest moments in One Punch Man, as this character isn't even supposed to be in the conversation of the strongest, but out of nowhere he suddenly started matching Monster Garu. This monster prior to this blitzed and one-shotted Platinum S. But the weird thing about all of this is that Garu here should be on a level of speed of which allows him to never be detected by at least non-S-class heroes. And yet you see these guys seeing and reacting to them from a faraway helicopter. Some people say that the only reason they can see them is because they were standing still a lot of times, unlike when Flash, Platinum and Garu fought where they were bouncing through the breeze. But the very first time they react to them, they were actually in the middle of a fight. But then there's also a time where Metal Bat is fast enough to save Garu from almost getting hit by say Centipede. I'm sorry, but the whole thing is weird. You can say that Garu isn't going all out in terms of speed, and you can say no, he is going all out. It's just a matter of inconsistencies in the story. But nonetheless, even when ignoring this, Metal Bat now has the explosive power to damage say Centipede alongside Garu, and with Resonance he also destroyed his Carapace. This gets insane if you think say Centipede should on a narrative standpoint be at least above Orochi, which means that Metal Bat has the speed and the power to at least put up a fight with these levels of monsters. At number 5 we have 10 seconds mode Genos, and I don't think this needs much more explanation, as Genos in this time frame can match Psycho Orochi's beam that literally did this. Psycho Orochi is also a monster whom I believe should be stronger than Sage Centipede, and if you wanna know why I came up with this conclusion, you should watch this video, which is exactly why matching her in this context is much better than only cracking Sage Carapace with the help of Resonance. Both have crazy conditions that allow them to perform these crazy feats, but Genos' feat is much better. Now the next pick I admit is purely headcanon, as we have absolutely no knowledge nor feats regarding this character. But at number 4 we have Metal Knight's full arsenal. You see, the only thing we know about this in the manga is that Girogiro thought that with Metal Knight's military might he can take care of Elder Centipede, and according to the data book he does have over 100 machines. If we assume each one can defeat 2 demon level monsters and possibly even higher, then you'd have the equivalent of having 100 S-class heroes in his army. He's also a genius who's on par possibly higher than Dr. Kuseno, so he might have one robot that has much higher destructive power than 10-second Genos. Again, all of these are based on pure speculations and assumptions, but my headcanon is telling me this is where he should be placed at. Imagine he created a weapon that can defeat the next character. And speaking of which, at number 3 we have the obvious choice, Tornado of Terror Tatsumaki. Now Tatsumaki is considered as the Hero Association's strongest weapon, literally the strongest monster in the Monster Association, fused with Psychos and amped by God, still couldn't fathom the strength of Tatsumaki. The only reason Psycho Orochi was able to stand her ground is because Tatsumaki couldn't risk to endanger the hostage and her fellow heroes. Her feats and showings are so much above the other heroes, it feels wrong to even start to justify it. What these two characters are doing in extreme conditions, Tatsumaki can do them on a casual level. The only characters that surpasses her are literally the strongest in the universe, universe or those who are blessed with godly powers. Which brings us to the god tier, which has two characters that are regarded as monsters even above the likes of Tatsumaki. At number 2, we have the number 1 hero, Blast. You see, what I said about Tatsumaki being so much above the other heroes can also be said about Blast being so much above even Tatsumaki. This guy is such a Chad that threats like the Monster Association and the Dark Matter Thieves aren't even worth his attention, as he's on a level where he can fight entities that are amped by God, such as his fight with Cosmic Fear Garu and his crazy feat of matching both Garu and Saitama's serious punches and briefly containing their energy for a considerable amount of time. These feats alone are just otherworldly compared to the power standards of the One Punch Man series.
この声はキング
S 級7位のキング史上最強の男だと噂されているが
キング身の潔白を疑われてしまっては仕方のないことだ
Thank you so much for watching this, and I think this is the longest video I've ever worked on. There are a couple of characters I didn't mention, like current Flashy Flash and current Genos, since their scaling in my belief is still on hold. Nothing really is concrete. But anyways, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for more to come. Until next time, please take good care.